Coming to you raw and unscripted. Beaming across Ontario and beyond. To places like Staples, Elmvale, Mabley, and Heron Bay. This is the Real Hickson Real Estate Podcast. Whether you're listening on your commute or putting on your suit, whether it's your morning stroll or you're on patrol, you just finished prayer or dropped the kids at daycare, you're in the bar, your car, or listening with the bathroom door ajar, near or far, this is the Jess and Giro Show. We're grateful for flattery and prone to inaccuracies. This is your guide to Toronto culture, people, events, news, but most importantly, real estate talk. Yes, hello guys. We are back for another podcast.
Hello.
This year in the positive 2024.
It's not the first one of the year.
No, it's the second one, but another one. Is that what I said?
I don't know.
No, we can go back and check the tapes. We only just started. But here we are. And who else do we have here today, Jessica?
My childhood best friend, my first ever elementary school bestie.
Hi everybody, my name is Robbie.
It's Robbie. Thanks for coming along, Robbie.
Thanks
really
for having me.
It.
A local fave.
A local fave. And why is Robbie here today? Well, he's not an expert. In fact, he's the opposite. He's good at many things in life. But when it comes to real estate, there's an experience there. So the whole point of today is we're doing the First Home Special 2.0. You can hear Alfie pittering and pattering around in the background. And he wants to figure out some stuff too.
Yeah, we're both very excited.
Both very excited. And we're going to be seeing what it's like from the outside looking in. Jess and I are always talking about real estate. And we're always talking to mortgage brokers. And we're talking to real estate lawyers. And we're talking to other real estate agents. And, I do come across people that haven't, maybe they want to find out about real estate. They've never done it before. And we're always trying to help these people. So I want to find out, what does it look like on the outside looking in?
Maybe let our guests start talking now that you've spoken for 3 minutes straight.
Well, I just wanted to explain the topic, the conversation. So, Robbie, please introduce yourself. Do a little bio, Robbie.
Okay, well, first off, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
My name is Robbie. I'm Jessica's childhood friend, now friends with Giro. We've known each other for quite a few years now.
Don't age us.
I think I'm the oldest one here, actually.
Wow.
I don't mind aging myself. I live in Vaughan. I'm local, and I currently live with my parents. I don't know much about the real estate world, but I would love to learn more to prepare myself for the future. I would like to say that the thing that comes to my head in terms of the real estate world is the word intimidation. That's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah,
I definitely want to learn
unknowns.
more. Yeah, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what if I was to tell you, before we get into the actual market stuff of what's happening in the last month or so, what if I were to tell you that right now there's a lot more opportunities than there have been maybe in the last 3 years?
Yeah, I would believe that, but I would still feel like it's very competitive and intimidating. And from what I've seen in the past few years, it's just a market that a first-time buyer doesn't feel comfortable getting into.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, that's a fantastic segue. So this is, whenever I start these podcasts, I always start with the market conditions. But what I want to do is ask you, what do you know about the current market that we're in, or maybe where we've been the last 6 months, or where we're headed? Do you know anything about that?
For someone who doesn't know much, from what I've seen, especially on social media, it seems like it's fluctuating a lot. And that, like I said, there's lots of competition. I've seen things in the news where people list their homes for really low, and then it becomes a bidding war. Mm-hmm. And it seems like there is a lot in the market, but it's not really accessible financially for someone who is a first-time home buyer. So I don't know much. I don't know how to get into it. That's the issue.
Did you hear all the talk about interest rates? Like, has that... Like, do you understand when people start talking about increasing interest rates?
Yeah, I understand that. And that's another thing that's kind of scary. It's like, how can one person afford this on their own? And then you also have regrets too, because you think of what the prices were 15 years ago.
Yeah.
and how
we
they
should have been buying houses in
exactly.
elementary school.
Well,
Guys, how come you didn't do that?
seriously.
You stupid?
Oh, we just partied too much. That was the problem.
Yeah, we weren't thinking of the
No,
future.
but I think if you look back, you just kind of want to kick yourself because now is obviously worse than it was 15 years ago.
Yeah, even 5 years ago.
Yeah, and then you say, do I really want to spend $1.5-2 million in a home where you look at places like the United States where it's so much cheaper for something better, and you just feel like you're not really getting your bang for your buck, you know?
Yeah, it
So.
feels unattainable.
It's interesting you said $1.5-2 million. Do you associate the cost of a home with that amount?
A home that I would want, yeah.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. That's
He
fair.
has expensive taste.
Yeah, I'm not living in a shanty town.
Do you know, like, to be realistic, like, not to look outside of the Ontario or even rural Ontario, but do you know what the kind of entry level cost, the ballpark figures?
Yeah, I would say like a
Toronto?
1-bedroom condo, the minimum price would be $600,000. Isn't that correct?
I mean, depending on the location.
Yeah, but I would say even in Vaughan itself, like I obviously browse online periodically just to see if there's anything that I could see myself buying. Something that would be, I would say, an entry level place or entry level home. But at the same time, I'm 35 years old now. I don't really want to be living in a studio or a 1-bedroom because I want to entertain and I want to have guests. So realistically, looking at something where I can do those things is going to cost more.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, but what's interesting is just to compare it to what your preconceived idea of it is. So in February 2022 was the peak, okay? So that was the peak compared to now. And we might have a big year this year, but for right now, so in 2022, pretty much the entry-level condo in Toronto was like 500 or less is like non-existent. It was like 550 and maybe it's a co-op, like that's a messy situation. Maybe high maintenance fees. 600, 650 was when you started to get into like the basic stuff. And of course beyond, like I think the average was more like in the 700s at that point.
But you're saying in the city.
That was, well, just in the GTA in general.
Okay.
Because here's another interesting point. It's changed recently. Like around the late 2010s is when everything just started becoming almost the same price. Like obviously there's a premium for downtown, obviously, and for certain pockets. But, in terms of rent, it all ended up being like, I remember at one point, every single 1-bedroom unit, whether it was in Vaughan, Markham, downtown, east, west, it was all just $2,000 a month.
Okay.
That was it, right?
And then it just like went up from there.
But now, comparing that entry level cost, now we're talking about $450K or $500K for like a semi-reasonable, of course, that's increasing. But yeah, so your idea of the market right now, what would you say?
I would say that it just feels inconsistent. It seems like it's constantly changing. And how would somebody like me know when to get in?
Yeah,
That's a great question.
Yeah, and like I said, in the past, everything was so much cheaper, and we didn't know that the prices were going to be drastically increased and fluctuating over time like that.
Or interest rates were going to take such a jump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So everything's changed so much. So I don't know. It's like something that's very unknown to me.
Yeah. Okay, so right now, what is happening in the market? Well, we had, as we've talked about previously, we've had a pretty slow fall market of last year. A lot, from the last 6 months of last year, things really dropped. Why was this? Well, the interest rates historically high. We're going back to maybe like mid to late 2000s in terms of interest rates. We've been here before, but it has been dropping over the last like decades, right?
Yeah, it's hard for most modern people to remember because if you bought your house in the 80s, it didn't affect you. If you bought your house 15 years ago, it didn't affect you. Like none of us remember. These are historical highs in the last 10 years at least.
And even speaking to the accountant today, he kind of echoed the same sentiment. Canadians are inherently conservative with the money, which I think is a good thing. It's fantastic. There's two parallels here, which is I'm just going to touch on briefly. Canadians tend to, according to the studies, carry more debt than some other like similar countries, but they're also really good at saving and managing the debt, which is like super interesting to say. But essentially, the last 6 months, people have been that conservative kind of person, which of course, affects the market and prices have been dropping. Now, January, February, we're getting back into the spring fever that we usually have. It's still a little bit mixed. Now, one thing to note, condos aren't having the same activity as houses are. During the fall market of last year, one thing in particular was that specific homes, like nice homes, maybe even luxury in certain pockets of Toronto, were still having a lot of activity. I think people were just waiting for the right timing to get into those specialized pockets that in a normal market, a normal busy market, it's just almost impossible. But now everyone's kind of joined in. The GTA, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, Markham, all those kinds of areas all around Toronto, they're really starting to get a lot of activity. Again, condos are a little bit slower to get started this year. And of course, cottage country is just absolutely going backwards. Did you know that, Robbie?
No, but I was going to ask you, would you say that the prices fluctuate based on the season as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because, it would make sense if, let's say, cottage country is more expensive in the springtime.
Yeah.
It's not even just that it's more expensive, it's just more people thinking about making the moves there, so that pushes the prices up. And then there's more inventory in those months, so there's more activity happening. Like, many people are not putting their houses on the market in those areas in January because nobody wants to buy.
And I'm assuming homes in general too would be more expensive in the spring because people will have the backyard.
Yes.
Whereas condos,
and people are planning for their kids, so they like to close in the summertime so that they can get the kids into school by September. It's that's why there's a push in the spring. It chills out in the summer, a little bit of activity in the fall. The winter quiets down, and then it all starts again.
On top of the factor of the actual market itself and what year it is and how it's going and all that. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's what we're saying is typical. And we are kind of getting back to that. But ever since the pandemic, it's been a little bit off kilter, I would say. Weird markets at the end of 2020, when things usually die off in Christmas time around the holidays, it actually kind of pushed all the way through and directly into a spring market.
And it's not like you're going to get a discounted house because you bought it in November. You may, because if the person who's selling is able to take a hit on it, there's opportunities for sure. But you can't necessarily, it's not like things don't go on sale. There's not a Black Friday sale.
That would be nice.
The first concept, Robbie, to understand is it only takes, in my mind, and in these markets in the GTA, I can't really speak to the rest of Canada, but it really can only take 1-2 weeks, maybe a month, for prices to really start jumping up.
Okay.
You see one good comparable. All of a sudden, you want 10 or 20 or 30,000 more. If there's enough of that happening in quick succession, you have the prices getting pushed up, especially with people with the idea of fear of missing out, that kind of thing. Whereas on the other side of it, it took 3-6 months for prices to really come down. Why? Because they were sitting in the market. If people didn't need to sell, they would take it off the market. Okay, we'll try next year when things get better. Or if they had to sell, if they still wanted to sell, they might be doing price reductions, or all of a sudden it's listed for this price and it's quite a bit under asking. So that new price sets the new benchmark for the area, and all of a sudden another buyer gets a little more positive and thinks they can get a little bit cheaper than that. So it does take a lot longer for prices to come down versus going up. Does that make sense?
Well, with the prices, when they list them below in order to get a higher outcome,
yes,
is that related to the season as well, or they're just looking to...
Just with more buyer activity, you have more of an opportunity to get multiple offers.
Okay.
So as there's more buyers coming out, then that's a tactic that agents use to get more eyes on the property, and then in turn get multiple offers and say, I sold 125% over asking.
But doesn't the buyer know this?
Yes.
And aren't they prepared to go over a certain price?
Yeah.
So it's interesting you bring this up. So this is actually what's starting to happen again. We've seen it in the busiest markets, is there's multiple offers. People call it a bidding war. I don't like that term, and it's because it's like everyone needs to fight over the same thing. And yes, they're competing for sure, but it really devalues the buyer. And the prices that people are paying. I hate the idea, because I've been on both sides, the listing side and on the buyer side, and I hate the idea of someone's got a good offer. It maybe doesn't get the house, but we're still talking sometimes millions of dollars. And that's real money. It's real money that they put forward. And I don't want to ever devalue, if I'm on the listing side and I get multiple offers, I'm really appreciative of every offer that comes in. We just did this recently and on our listing. And as you may have seen on social media, we sold a home. Won't go into the details, but essentially we got multiple offers. And actually we got those offers before the offer date. Now, what's an offer date? An offer date is usually, 7 or 8 days after you list a home. That first week and a half is like the busiest period, depending on the market. If you have the right market, as we were saying before, you need the market for it. If you have the right market, you know that the buyers that you're getting in that first week and a half are the most ready. They're the most willing. They're the most, charged and emotionally ready buyers, essentially.
But coming from your point of view as like a person who is just seeing a price and then all of a sudden it's listed for 700,000 and then you see a price for 900,000, like that must be like, what happened there?
Well, yeah, that's
right?
why it's discouraging to me.
Like how did that happen?
I saw a post recently on social media where a agent was bragging about how much they sold a house for in a bidding war, and this was a completely average house that I wouldn't even set foot in, let alone make an offer. And this house sold for like $2.8 million in Markham. And the agent was just bragging about it. And when you were saying devaluing the client, that's kind of how I felt. It was like...
It's like it's such big money, like that's so much.
It's almost like it's like a joke sometimes. And
it's like what is that 2.8 million with the interest rates that we currently have? Whether they have need a mortgage or not. That's like
of course.
A lot of money.
Like I don't think it's worth it.
From the outside looking in, like you'd be like, what even like? What is that?
Because I would understand from the other side. Yeah, of course.
The seller wants as much as possible.
Of course, but then as a buyer, I'm just like, forget that. I don't want to
go there
my life's work into something that's below average. That's why I want something at a decent price that I can be proud of, that I can enjoy. So it's always a constant struggle and constant eye out to see what's out there.
Not to plug our own podcast, but we do have many episodes where we talk about building blocks, like starting something small, staying there and you've watched me do it like firsthand.
That's true.
Like a small little place, you make a little bit of money, you get into the next place, you make a little bit of money, and even the house we're in right now is not my forever home, but we know eventually we'll get there because we're just building on something. We turned a very small condo into another property. And one day I'll have a bigger house. I don't think 2.8 million anytime soon. But that's the thing. So I know you want that goal house, but none of us are gonna get there on the first goal. They're not our parents. We all know our parents did it 40 years ago, and we're just not in the same generation.
There's just so much to talk about, and I think that's the point. For any first-time home buyer who hasn't been through the motions, like I haven't even finished talking about offer presentations.
I'm so sorry. I don't think
no, it's okay. But it's like it's kind of understanding bit by bit how it all works. Now, the only thing I will finish in saying, because we will get through kind of all this stuff, is there's the bad side of it, which is like the ego boosting and look, I sold this house over. Some people list it for $1. Can you believe that? Like maybe a home is worth 1.3 or 1. They list it for $1. Why? Like they're trying to get the attention. The only real reason that you should list it for offers, and it's kind of what we did recently, was the home that we listed. Number one, it was a unique home. So it was a corner lot. It had some features in it that were pretty unique to the area, or at least there was no homes that have come up in the last 3 to 6 months that are reasonable comparables to it, right? And that's the other thing, reasonable comparables. Now, for me, that home ended up selling in the mid 1.5s. I'm looking at, well, maybe we can get someone that their budget was 1.5 and they wanted to stay there, but they see the home. We listed it a little bit lower at 1.4, and they see the home because it's in their budget now. Otherwise, it doesn't even appear in their searches, by the way. They see it and they decide, you know what? I never considered this home. It actually has 4 bedrooms. We've been looking at 3. I think 4 bedrooms is the better choice, and the space and the layout, whatever it may be. And all of a sudden they go back to their mortgage broker. Yes, it is possible to do this new amount. And then they come in and now they're spending a little bit more.
But on the other side, the buyer that is working with their agent, the agent would say to them, listen, like, I know you see this one price, but this home is actually worth a different price. So please understand that the price that it's listed for is not a true price.
Okay.
And that's what's complicated. Like, if you have no knowledge, you've never done this before, like, how would you know that? What do you mean? It's listed for 1.5. What do you mean they want $2 million? Why? Says who?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That's so, like, it's so foreign.
Yeah.
Now you flip it the other way. I know the price that my buyers wanted. Okay. And I know the price that my sellers wanted. And there was another home that was listed a little bit higher to that. They were getting no showings. It's been sitting on the market for months. And this was what I was trying to avoid. So there is positives to doing this. I know it's confusing to people. The major difference is that when I look, what I will see is brokerage remarks. Any listing that can be seen on Realtor.ca or any of the third-party apps, you can't see these special remarks. And the special remarks include the indications to us as agents as to whether it's offers any time, which is the traditional listed a little bit higher than what you normally want, or whatever that is, versus the listing it lower for the concentrating the interest and all that kind of stuff. So that's really the major difference. But again, yeah, it's definitely intimidating and it's confusing for a lot of people, especially your parents wouldn't understand it potentially because
it's a different market.
It's a much different market.
Yeah, and they weren't doing things like that.
The prices were different.
Yeah. And you didn't have to start small and keep selling and buying and selling and buying. Your parents probably, that was their first home.
Yeah, I think they rented when they got married and then they bought that house right after.
Yeah.
So.
And then they'll probably stay in it until they're 80.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not a life, unfortunately, we're privileged with any longer.
No.
Yeah. So I guess that leads me to another fantastic segue, Robbie, is what did your parents, if anything, what have they told you about real estate, whether it's just things they see or hear or like advices they might give to you?
I would say for the most part there hasn't been much. Probably because when they were home buyers, the market was so different, so they're probably unaware of the current state of the market and the way things are done now versus how they used to be done.
They would say we had a 19% interest rate. I'm sure they told you that before when my parents, when they bought their house, it was like 19% interest rate. And they'll compare it to, you guys had 5% interest rate. But there's such a discrepancy in the purchase price that like your 19% interest rate, unfortunately, we can't.
I think my parents paid maybe $300 or $320 for their house in 1987. And now those houses are worth like 1.2 to 1.6, I think. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they really have just, and it's not by doing anything. This is the funny thing about real estate is like, and not everywhere in the world it appreciates like this. I've made a lot of points about this. The GTA, it's really, in my opinion, it's controversial. The one major city in Canada. Yes, the next biggest city is Montreal.
Vancouver.
No, actually, number 2 is Montreal, believe it or not. I thought it was until recently I learned. And then Vancouver, and then actually Ottawa. So, I mean, these are all changing and these are all developing. And naturally, we're seeing other hubs open up around the country. Especially during the pandemic, we had people moving to Halifax.
Yeah, I would say a lot of my colleagues, because I travel for work, a lot of my colleagues have moved to Calgary.
Yeah,
because the prices
Calgary had
right
a massive
there.
boom last year. That's a whole nother conversation.
And up north too, I would say.
But comparing to the States, I mean, it's a semi-fair comparison. It's a very different country, but similar in a lot of ways. Is the States has many as you fly around for work. There's so many major cities in the States, in the middle of nowhere, as well. Even minor cities in the middle of nowhere. The population is just so different.
And they're very quick to like move from state to state. Like we don't move provinces nearly as like easily as they.
I don't think we have as many choices and opportunities because, like you said, there's only a few major cities. And they're really far apart. So it's not as realistic to do it in Canada, I would say. Yeah. It depends what industry you work in as well, right?
And culturally, like, we are more interested in being, like, close to family.
Of course. Yeah, I would say so.
So we touched on it a little bit already. What do you see in the media, whether it's online, newspapers, articles? Also, social media is a new kind of avenue of information, what have you seen? What have you learned from it?
In terms of real estate, I would see influences from different places. So first off, I see friends who work in the real estate market always posting about the state of the market.
Do you see us? You see
of
us?
Course, yeah. I haven't muted or unfollowed you guys just yet. But who knows? Play your cards right. No, I've seen obviously posts that people have made in the media and on social media regarding the market, listings, and then I've seen friends who've, like you, moved from smaller beginnings to bigger homes, and they're flipping houses.
We call them stepping stone homes.
Yeah, stepping stone homes, but they could be on their 10th stepping stone, and I feel like I'm not there yet. So sometimes I'm just like, damn, I'm just gonna ignore it because it's.
Do you feel like the gap is too big?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. Does you like someone post like, we just bought a house, standing in front of the house? Like, do you feel like, when will it be me that?
Yeah,
does
of
that?
course.
Yeah,
exactly. So. Like, I have friends that are my age that are living in these crazy beautiful homes, like right downtown Toronto, and then people who built customs homes up north, and it's like, I don't know, like I haven't done it yet, and I feel like a lot of the fear is because of the regret of not starting earlier.
Yeah.
So, but we can't turn back time,
no,
right?
of course, and the only thing you can do is move forward.
Exactly.
So, as we try to tell people, it's never too late. You just have to change your expectations.
Yeah.
You need to maybe figure out a way to get there, and if it takes 5 extra years or 10 extra years, like, who's counting?
Exactly.
I just think it's also a lack of a plan, and it's not really your fault. It's just in general, your parents aren't really putting a plan. They're not teaching you. You don't, when you go to university, you don't really learn about university unless you're taking a specific course. We learned most of what real estate is about when we were doing it, and obviously studying to get our license and stuff like that. But outside of that, it's just how many people are talking about it. You know, like, you see all the really, intense stuff in the news, which is partly related to you, but for the most, there's not a lot of people talking about, let's say, like, how many people in the media are coming out and saying, hey, here's an article, 10 good steps on how to get yourself prepared in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years.
I've never seen anything like that.
Never seen that stuff.
How to build your credit so that you can get a mortgage. How to save for a down payment. Did you know for your first home, you only need this much percent? Like, maybe you never even had a conversation. Like, maybe you think you need $250,000 to get into the market, which is false. No one told you. That's like, obviously, when I first got into the market, it was like I needed 25,000. Like, it was a much more attainable number. Like, now, I think it's probably still 25,000 for under 500,000.
Yeah. I mean, it's doable, and it's not like you have to buy in Toronto. The advice I give is like, you don't necessarily have to live in what you buy, right? And this was what someone gave me the advice, and I thought, wow, like, I'd never considered, like, I mean, obviously, it depends on your situation, and maybe it's not ideal for everyone. But you could buy, and I was telling in previous episodes, you could buy something in Kitchener, Waterloo, rent it out, and still live the same lifestyle that you're living in Toronto. It's also a huge thing now where rent is so expensive, and you're kind of lucky in that regard that you're still living at home. But the reality is, there's your parents and you. It's quite a large house. There is space. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And not everyone has that privilege as well.
And it's kind of sad for some people who really want to buy, but they're spending maybe all their money on their rent.
Yeah, like, how do you save? It's impossible.
No, it's impossible.
So, I mean, that's a huge motivating factor. I mean, their rent is essentially paying someone else's mortgage.
Yeah.
But, okay, so do you think any of this helps, or who do you think is being the authority in teaching you? Or is it there at all for you?
I don't think there's an authority to teach us. I think it's more like, you really need to look at it yourself if you're interested in it to find the avenues to educate yourself, right? Because we're not educated on it when we're growing up.
No.
And then, like I said, my family never really brought it up to me because they were never in the market, right? So we never really had to discuss these things.
No, it's not like you moved 3 times.
Yeah, it wasn't a topic of a conversation, and I don't know what I thought when I was younger, if it was just going to magically happen.
For sure.
But probably.
Yeah, and I mean, this is probably the difference between you guys and me, is my parents were always moving, and we were renting when they had owned property and they were renting out the properties, they split it into I mean, in Sydney's a little bit different. It's similar but different. They had a house that we were living in at one point. Then they divided it with a wall and created 2 separate entrances. It was always money moves. So they don't necessarily directly teach me about real estate, but they did teach me that, you know, you use these moves and you do make the sacrifices. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is, you know, the first era, let's call it an era with Taylor Swift touring around, the first era of your first time home journey is going to be a lot of sacrifices, you know, and I think that's the message that we try to get through. I have a follow-up question though, just with using a real world example. Do you see our stuff on social media?
I do, yeah.
So have you learned anything from us?
Yeah, I've learned about obviously like the price of the market, what it takes to sell your home based on your listings, and the current state of availability in the market, I would say.
Yeah. Because I do try to mix the posts. It's not just ego posts.
No, not
whatever.
at all.
I mean, you know, we have to tell people what we're doing.
Yeah.
We sold this or that. And I always use the term, by the way, not over asking, especially in those offer situations. I like to say maybe a little bit over market value.
Yeah.
I think that's more fair.
I do have multiple friends that are agents, and I would say yours are your posts are the least intimidating out of everybody that I know.
Right.
Okay.
And we
it's
do
more
mix
like
it up.
If you had a question, you would feel comfortable to
Exactly.
ask.
Yeah, because I have other agents like you said, ego posting, bragging about their
accomplishments.
Exactly, and I don't think that's the way to go about it. Or I even have another friend who posts only, I would say, elite type of postings where they're extremely expensive or they just don't seem marketed towards the average person.
Right. You're like, this is not gonna be your typical
buyer. Like I would never,
like
I'd love to live there, but I'm never gonna buy it.
Well, I mean, I think that's okay too. I mean, everyone has their demographics,
that's their
market.
niche. That's fine.
That's their niche.
But I could see how that's like overwhelming. Even when I see a listing that's $10 million, like I look at it as like, holy.
And the reason that I don't post, I try to mix it up with other value posts, like teaching people, is because it's hard to relate to just this sold. Like, what does that mean to me? Yeah. Even someone that's actively looking in the market, if by chance they happen to be looking in the same pocket or the same area or maybe the same home type as that, they can slightly relate or completely relate. But otherwise, it doesn't mean anything.
That's true.
You know what I mean? And people post numbers without context. When I post with the stats, month over month, year over year, it's gone up 2%. What does that even mean?
Well, sometimes I see these posts with the price attached to it, and most of the time they're in Toronto, and the home that's sold is like something I wouldn't even set foot in. So a lot of the times I see these posts, I'm thinking, who in their right mind spent $3 million on a shack? Just because of the location.
Yeah.
I'd rather live in the suburbs, get something nicer, or just, that's why I get discouraged. Yeah. Because I don't want to work so hard to buy something that doesn't look nice or isn't where I want to be. It just doesn't make sense to me at all.
No, not at those prices.
It's not justified.
No.
I mean, my favorite thing is, looking at some articles, and I won't say who it is, but they're pretty notorious for it. This tiny home just sold in the beaches for $2.4 million. And yes, you're right. It is a 12-foot lot and 12 foot small. Robbie, this house, by the way, is like 18 foot across. So this is like a reasonable size, I feel. They get much bigger with detached.
I think my bedroom's bigger than that.
But they sold this 12 foot and the lot's probably 12 foot by about 100 or even 90. Right? And people jump on, not understanding anything. This is the problem with affordability. And I get it. It is much less affordable. But realistically, that lot was probably big enough to buy the lot itself, and that's really what it is. And if it's a tear down or not, that's generally what it is. Okay, the home looks crap, but it's a tear down. We were looking at the lot value. You could subdivide that.
Not a 12 foot lot.
Okay, but
back to front potentially. No. So I'm saying, okay, I'm just saying.
Maybe give a better example, like a 30-foot lot.
Okay, but can I interrupt for a minute? Also, who is coming in buying this? What did you say? $2 million?
Yeah,
$2 million lot, tearing it down and then building a custom, like
it is happening.
But this is what's happening, and that's
why.
Where's
all this money coming from?
And you know what? They could build it. They could build something in a certain matter and maybe rent it, or they could resell it.
Yeah.
now and actually make a profit. That's and if people weren't making money off this situation, they wouldn't be buying. Yeah. And you know what would happen then? The lot value would devalue, and it would actually reach a point. Okay, maybe it's not 2.2, it's now 1.8. Oh, that's developer then comes in, or whoever it is. All of it. That's what the supply and demand.
I have another point to bring up, and I don't know if this is on your agenda, but it's in regards and in relation to what we're talking about. I feel like foreign home buyers are also creating an increase in the price and making it unattainable for people like me.
Yes.
So that's why I get a little infuriated because I keep thinking, if this didn't happen, or if this wasn't happening, would it be more affordable for me? Would the prices be lower?
Definitely a factor.
Yes.
And I think the reality is for Toronto, in the last 30, 40 years, is we've seen a massive shift. There wasn't so much international demand. There's always been immigration and people, but actual just straight foreign, control of local properties, it's changed completely. And in my opinion, when I first came here from Australia, wow, it's so affordable here. I came here in 2014. Oh my God, it's so affordable. And even when we came around to buying the property we're in now, it was still relatively affordable back in 2019, 2020. And people are coming from places like Hong Kong, for example. People are coming from Europe now. Maybe, I've talked about this before, maybe the Ukraine war scared a few people out of Europe, and that, I want to buy into a safer country. The way people look at Canada is it's a very safe, accessible country, very welcoming.
But I also think
friendly.
that people are buying these homes without the intention of actually living in them.
Well, that's why there's all new things like a vacant home tax. Yeah. There are implications to try to help that.
There's a house that we know very well that we used to refer to as the Hamptons, and it was a family member's home that was extremely beautiful, which was purchased in 1999 for $1.2 million. 6,000 square foot ranch style bungalow in Stouffville, ended up selling in 2018 for like three and a half or something.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this house that was one of the most picturesque places I've ever known, like personally, has been sitting vacant for years, dilapidated.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's very sad.
Yeah, it's sad. And that's how I feel is happening to a lot of other places, condos, vacant places.
Yeah.
And it's like, if these places were actually being lived in by local buyers, they'd probably be more attainable.
Now, there is another element to this, which is more advanced real estate talk, which is the way corporations use their assets and their money, whether it be local or foreign. Just to touch on it, for example, there are some people coming from China that are limited in how they can buy things abroad, whether it be stocks or investments. But property, for example, is a loophole for that, and they are able to buy property in Toronto, and it's almost like putting money in the bank.
Okay, so that's just
one.
Their money.
It's just one element of it.
It's a safe investment.
Okay.
For
yeah. The other new thing since the pandemic, not to make it less positive, but there are now holding companies, there are investment firms that are actually, rather than investing in gold or resources or ETFs or stocks, whatever it is, they are investing more in real estate. Okay. Actually, today I learned that the CPP is one of the world's most prolific real estate buyers. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
But my point is that some of these properties, they're being bought on a corporate basis, on a business basis, and whether someone lives in there or not, that's their decision of how they work the money.
I just think it's a shame when it
of course
increases the market.
Yeah, because as a person who's been in this country your whole life, you saw yourself buying real estate, and it's becoming less and less attainable.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a very fair assessment.
Now, the real conversation is that the realization that Toronto, and I've said this a lot of times, Toronto doesn't belong to Canada anymore, it belongs to the world. And whether you think that's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, there's plenty of positives that have come from it. There's definitely some negatives as well. It's anyone's decision what they think of that. But it's just the reality. I saw it happening in Sydney, before I left. Obviously London, in all these major cities around the world. And that's just the reality. Like when I first moved here, not that many people have heard of Toronto. Now, a whole bunch of people, if I ever speak to them from back home in Australia, they're very well aware of what Toronto is. Now, how did that come about? I think it's naturally people coming here and figuring it out. You know, a lot of Aussies going to the West Coast, and that's going to Whistler and Banff and whatever, and maybe going to Montreal or whatever. But, you know, now they're discovering Toronto. Was it a Drake thing? Was it a Raptors championship thing? Was it a Trudeau thing? You know, there's many different factors that now Toronto's kind of put up there on the world map. And, you know, the reality is, as I said before, like, it will spawn, you know, other hubs outside of the city, just out of necessity. Like you're saying, like, I can't buy in Toronto. Now, the reality is we are still talking about it. It's definitely hard to buy in Toronto for you, or even the GTA for that matter. But it's still somewhat of a conversation. That's the major positive, I'll tell you. Back home, just to relate it back to Sydney, people my age in their mid to late 20s and their early 30s, no one's really talking about buying in Sydney anymore. Some people are, for sure, and maybe it's the parents helping them out, maybe they have a good job, maybe they found themselves in a good situation. But a lot of people ended up moving north, for example, to Queensland, similar to what happened here, people moving to Calgary, Alberta, out east, and it's just out of necessity. The number one advice I'd give is you can either be someone that complains about real estate, which is completely understandable, and you sit in a group of people, you know, the government this and the this and that and whatever, or you can figure out a way how to get in and make it work for you. Because people that have done that, we have plenty of clients even in the last 3 years that have been able to do it. They're like, you know, some of them, I'm glad I'm able to do it, or some people, I wish I had done this sooner, or just that you don't hear any more complaints because now
then you're reaping the benefits, right? Like as the market increases, if you're already in the market, it's only to your benefit. Yes, like for us, it's always harder to get to the next move because the next place keeps getting more and more expensive. But when you're in the market, you're happy to ride the increases.
But the first step is always the scariest.
We said today to our accountant, the first million's the hardest.
Yeah, that's what they say in business. The second million's a lot easier.
Yeah, the second one comes quicker. The first one takes your whole life to get to.
Okay, so we'll go back into the concepts. So the idea of getting a mortgage, buying a first home, and a plan for all of this. What do you currently know about any of this, if anything?
In terms of which aspect of that?
So like mortgages for first.
Okay.
I know how a mortgage works.
Well, I know you have to get approved for a mortgage.
Yeah.
If you have the finances, you'll get approved.
Do you know the process of...
The process? No.
Okay. So do you understand that getting a pre-approval, that doesn't mean a lot, actually?
Well, I thought it meant it was based on your salary and all that.
It's what it is. It's a guide. Yeah. It's a guide to
understanding what you would be able to qualify for.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And also the interest rate, is also creating that buying power.
Okay. As the interest rate increases, usually you have less buying power.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So if you were able to have a $500,000 mortgage at lower rate, maybe now your mortgage is only going to be $400,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not nothing pre-approval. It's definitely a guide because then you can go out, but it's not until you actually see a property, get a real-world example of the property, and obviously the last factor is what price it was bought for.
Does the mortgage have to cover the entire amount of the home?
No, so that's the most important thing for first-time home buyers, to understand that you don't need to put 20% down on your first place. You could put 5% up to the first $500,000 and then 10% moving forward. So it sounds like, oh, I need like hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it, but maybe really what you need is $50,000.
So let's do an example. Say I was buying a $600,000 condo. Yeah. Let's do the math. How would that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
That's
that's what you would
in high school. So please dumb it down for me.
So for the first $500,000, you would need 5%. So that's $25,000.
Okay.
And then
of my own money.
Of your own money, of cash.
Okay.
Then for that additional $100,000.
Okay.
Because $500,000 plus.
So the $25,000 goes towards the $500,000 mortgage.
Yes, but let me finish so that I can.
Sorry.
So $500,000.
Okay.
That's going to be $25,000.
Okay.
There's $100,000 remaining.
Okay.
To make it $600,000. So on that,
my high school math brain right now is working overtime.
You and I will sit down and do this correctly later. But for the additional $100,000, you need another $10,000. So for a $600,000 purchase price, you need $3,500.
That's it.
Yes.
Oh, I could have bought a place a long time.
But hang on.
That's all.
Yeah, but hang on.
But
I could have bought 2 places.
You do need land transfer tax, and land transfer tax is a sliding scale. So it actually starts to kick in around the $450,000 mark.
Okay.
There's a small amount that we're just talking the hundreds.
But
once you start getting to
get a
$600,000
$4,000 rebate. So to be like, just to give you like basic understanding of what a $600,000, you would need a roughly around $45,000 cash
down right away.
Not right away, like within a few months.
Like 3 months.
Sure.
Okay.
And then you would get a mortgage for the remainder.
And then you just pay your mortgage.
Yeah.
And it could be payments of whatever you want, really?
No.
No, they come up with.
No, but
they come
sorry,
up with
I thought that mortgage payments were significantly less than like a rent payment.
It depends on how much you put down. If you put more down, then your payments are going to be less. If the interest rate is higher, then it's going to cost more.
So I put down $45,000 on my $500,000 mortgage, which is a $600,000 condo.
So a $500 now my math is wrong. You would have a $555,000 mortgage. Okay. Let's say. Yeah. So you're paying the mortgage on the $550,000, not on the purchase price, on the mortgage amount.
Of course, because the mortgage, like the bank paid that, so I'm paying the bank back.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so what would like a rough estimate be like?
I would say about $3,000
a month.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's more than a rent.
Now, before
it used to be quite a bit.
Before
I thought it was like $500 a month.
So before the interest rates, have risen, even before 2020, I would say, it used to be rent used to be almost on par for what like a repayment was at the time. Now you're probably carrying it for a little bit more than rent, but rent's still historically high, right? You know, so apart from the month-to-month carry, the main thing what a mortgage broker does is figures out your debt-to-loan ratio. Okay. They look at your, maybe you have a car on lease or on finance. They look at your income. You know, there's all these kinds of things. Yes. We did do a whole episode on what mortgage brokers do, but essentially they qualify you for, hey, if you only put 15% down, this lender, this bank would give you this mortgage amount. Okay. And again, it's to do with the approval, and it's loosely based on the approval. Yeah. But what you really need is something called a commitment letter. You can't get a commitment letter until you have a signed, thing on a commitment letter. Like, is I write it down? Like I say, no, the lender,
the bank says this is how much we're willing to give you for the mortgage.
I thought it was like, hey guys,
want to make a commitment together?
To pay you back.
Yeah.
Because here's the other thing. Let's say the condo that is around $600,000. Yeah. If you end up getting them down, like because we are fantastic agents for you, maybe you pay $575. That's fantastic. The appraiser's going to come in and say, yep, that condo is definitely worth $575. Let's say you got crazy. You're like, oh my God, there's 10 people bidding on this place. It's now $700,000. Well, the lender might not agree to giving you that extra amount.
Okay, that's a little bit extra information for today.
But it's something to consider.
Yeah, but it's if you were looking at it, the more important question for you to understand is your down payment. Yes, it's a large chunk of money, but really what the bank wants to know is, can you repay this monthly amount every single month? That's your day-to-day. Okay. Your savings, of course, you've been saving your whole life. You have a chunk of money to put down. Amazing. But what you need to know is, does my salary allow me to pay this mortgage every single month? Okay. And that's the bank's goal. The bank says, okay, you make this much money, your expenses are this much, this is how much you're going to pay every single month. Am I comfortable to lend you this money to do that? Okay, and you have to say, am I comfortable to spend this type of money every single month? That's the real. All the other stuff is extra.
Yeah, I mean, we can go on.
That makes sense.
Yeah, do you get that?
Yeah, now I get it. I just wasn't expecting mortgage payments to be so much.
Listen, they're not going to continue to stay that much as the rates go down.
But another question I have for you is, they say, okay, your monthly payment is this amount. Do you get locked in at that, or does it fluctuate?
So that's a variable rate versus a fixed rate. Okay. So that's a great question.
So do you get to choose?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So in a variable situation, when the rates are low and you can continue to stay low, and then your rate, it's a little bit more crazy. Like when you have a salary, it's nice to have a fixed rate mortgage so you know what your expenses are going to be every single month. Sometimes you do pay a bit of a premium to have that. Yeah. But we could get into all of that. But yes, it's totally a choice. And when people locked in on those really, really low rates, like they knew that's the rate for 5 years.
Oh, okay.
So that's a really good thing to know.
Okay. And when I had actually mentioned to you before about renewal, before we started the podcast, what that really means is that there's the period, whether it's a 1, 3, 5 year, every time that anniversary comes up, you go back to the banks and you either continue with them or you can refinance. You hear this like 25, 30 year. That is a real thing. It's called amortization. We won't go into it, but it's just a way to spread out the payments over that term. Okay. But you do change every 2 years.
And as you pay down your mortgage, then you have a less, you're paying towards the principal of your mortgage. So then the next time you go to refinance, you have a little bit less of a mortgage, and then your rates go down. So the reason we buy properties is to pay down the mortgage and then eventually to have no mortgage.
Oh, or I win the lottery and just walk in with a lot of cash.
Sure.
That's right.
A mortgage.
And you'll buy us a house too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think that's a lot of information. Do you have any questions that you were thinking about during this?
Just in terms of actually, so we've been through the mortgages, the down payment, the land transfer tax that you now know about. Apart from that, it's maintenance fees if it's a condo, and taxes, property taxes.
The other thing I would say is, especially with condos, there's obviously all these mortgage fees and whatnot, but then sometimes I think about it and I say to myself, wow, I'm gonna have to spend this amount of money for a parking spot or for a maintenance fee and all that stuff. It's like, at this point, I might as well just get a house instead.
Yes, the cost of entry for a house is going to be more.
Yeah.
And parking is, you can buy parking with your unit.
Yes.
So that's...
But it's always more, obviously.
Yes.
But
say in Vaughan, most of the
I
time
find it
it's
ridiculous
included.
that it's not included.
Yeah. Most of the time, in the city, no. It's going to be $100,000 for a parking spot, depending on where it is. But most of the prices you're seeing listed include a parking space. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is maintenance fees on a parking spot, but they're small. They'll be like $20 a month. Yeah.
And what we'll finish on is, do you have any kind of plan, or do you think now that you know a little bit more, you have an idea of a plan?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I don't have a solid plan, but I do have to admit that I think about it all the time. I'm always browsing online.
Yeah.
You guys have answered so many of my questions today.
Amazing.
Because I didn't know a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
so it seems,
that's what we thought.
Yeah,
it's a good conversation to have.
A lot less intimidating for when I do seriously look at it. Like I said, I travel with work, so I don't think I have that fire lit underneath me because I'm only in Canada, I would say 3 nights out of the week. So sometimes I feel like, is it really worth it? But obviously in the future, yes, I'll need my own place.
But it seems a little less intimidating?
Yeah,
okay,
it seems less intimidating. And I would say what I learned today is the sooner the better.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for being so open and honest. It's tough stuff to talk about, so we appreciate it.
Of course.
I mean, there is a lot of noise. And again, until you break it down, it doesn't mean anything to anyone. $1 million, what does that all mean? The interest rates are up, they're down?
I think the thing that was hardest for me to understand is purchase prices is a number, sure, 1 million, 1.5, but it really isn't what matters. What matters is how much money can I put down in the beginning and what is it going to cost me to carry this place?
Yeah.
Because I'm not paying $1 million today.
Exactly.
Yeah. And gone are the days of my parents are going to live in this home and pay off the mortgage. It should be 20 years. If they really dig deep, they can pay it off in 18 or 17. That's still the concept, and people will still do that today.
Yes, and paying interest over the lifetime of a loan is a lot of money, and I'm not saying it's not, but it's just a little bit easier to swallow when you're thinking about a monthly expense rather than
all at once.
All of those zeros that $1 million has.
Yeah, and I mean, even for us personally, our next step could be that, we were thinking about getting something similar to this, but now it all of a sudden has a separate basement apartment, and we could rent that out to somebody. Yeah. And that's a mortgage helper. And all of a sudden, it's actually cheaper for us in the long run to do that than where we currently are, just in our own
That
home.
makes sense.
So,
okay, well, I'm glad it was informative and
thanks, guys.
Was it fun?
it was great. We should do it again.
Any final questions before we close the vault of knowledge?
We made Alfie pass out. He's probably so bored.
Yeah. Maybe just one final piece of advice you can give for me to take on the road that I can think about in the future.
I think we've given a lot of good nuggets today. What would you say, Jess?
I don't think you're gonna get everything you want on your first go.
That I understand. Yeah. Like, I'll give you an example of something ridiculous because I'm very picky. Like, I was looking at a condo once that I really liked, but the laundry door, for example, like, I didn't like the way it looked because it was in the kitchen, and I thought I would never buy this place because of that. But like,
you could change the door.
Yeah, just thinking like that. But obviously, like, bigger issues.
Yes.
But I think it's good to be realistic and to think about the future.
You will get what you want. You just may not get it on the first go.
Yeah,
it may take a couple years, and there's no race. I think maybe that's my advice.
Yeah, like the time is on everyone's side, and yes, like, to get in is obviously a lot harder. There's alternatives and ways around it in some cases, but just the idea of sacrifice, I think. Okay. Like, if someone was to tell you over the next 10 years, you're going to be really boring, you're going to, not be able to do a lot of fun things that maybe you would normally do, but after that 10 years, you could live exactly how you wanted, you could have everything you wanted, like, would you do it?
Yeah, I would.
You know what I mean?
100%. I would have did it sooner, though.
And I think that's...
I know, but we can't go back. Yeah. I wish I bought 3 condos in 2014. Yeah.
And I think that's maybe the final, the closing message is, especially to, the millennials and the newer generations that are so intimidated, as we said throughout this podcast, so intimidated by it, is that there is a way in somewhere, and it takes a bit of sacrifice. Like, maybe take stock and take audit of your life and what you're spending money on, and try and have a plan. I think that's got to be number one. And even, by the way, speaking to a mortgage broker, people think that's, I don't want to bother them, it's going to cost me something. No, it's not going to cost you a single thing. And mortgage brokers, especially the ones we refer, the nice ones, they're happy to explain concepts and get you on a path to, maybe you got to fix your credit here, or make a move there, or whatever it is, and set you up for, maybe it's a year time, maybe it's a 3-year time, maybe it's a 5-year. Yeah, it's super helpful.
Getting conversations going, that's the main thing, because now you have a little bit more knowledge than you had an hour ago.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
It was lovely.
Thanks, Robbie.
You're both lovely.
You're lovely.
And of course, guys, if you want to reach out to us, please, we're answering all of the questions.
You could be in our kitchen too.
You can be in our kitchen. We're kind of in the dining room here.
And sipping a gourmet coffee made by
Yeah, that's right. There you go. There's the perks. Please reach out. Email is hicksonrealestateteam@gmail.com. Or you can hit up like Instagram, Hickson Real Estate, @Hickson Real Estate.
TikTok.
We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. Or if you just want the newsletter, I'm sending out the newsletter once a month. And right now, special offer probably for the next week, I'm doing all my clients and all my favorite people, I'm doing CMAs for their house. What is that? Well, it's just a property evaluation. And you could have it too. Robbie, you reckon your parents would be interested in that?
Maybe, yeah.
Just to know what is my house cost?
Send it over.
What is it worth?
They're not going anywhere, but send it over.
No, I know, but it's just good to know.
Count their money.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.